On Sunday morning, there was a tragic death involving an NFL player by the name of Edwin Jackson. He was the Indianapolis Colts linebacker, and he was in an Uber at that time when a drunk driver unfortunately hit the car and he lost his life, and so did the individual driving the Uber. Now, CBS's This Morning has more on the story. Let's take a look at that, and then I'll give you Trump's reaction to it.
Around 4 o'clock Sunday morning in Indianapolis, Jackson and his Uber driver, Jeffrey Monroe, were killed. Their car was pulled over on the side of Interstate 70 because Jackson felt sick. Both of the men were outside of the vehicle when a black Ford F-150 truck plowed into them. The force of the impact threw one of the men into the center lane, where he was later accidentally struck by a state police vehicle.
You know, he looked at me like a brother, just like I looked at him like a brother.
That's Jackson's roommate, Chad Boucher, who had gone out with him the night he was killed.
He actually did the right thing, and he took an Uber. He was making the right steps to get home safely and not put anybody else in harm's way.
The driver of the truck, Manuel Oriego Zavala, was arrested with a blood alcohol level nearly 3 times the legal limit. According to a police affidavit, the suspect used an alias and was in the country illegally. Investigators say he was deported to Guatemala in 2007 and again in 2009.
So he was deported twice, but he found his way back into the United States. He was undocumented, obviously, and drunk behind the wheel. He is in custody. Now, Trump used this as an opportunity to push his anti-immigration agenda. In a tweet, he said the following: "So disgraceful that a person illegally in our country killed Colts linebacker Edwin Jackson. This is just one of many such preventable tragedies. We must get the Dems to get tough on the border and with illegal immigration fast." So this is to be expected from Trump. He continuously makes the case that people who are in the country illegally are more likely to commit violent crimes and more likely to drive drunk. But the studies that have been done on this very issue prove otherwise, and we'll get into those details in just a moment. But it is a tragic story, and I'm devastated for Jackson's family.
So look, if you wanted to do target any group, you could do it super easily, because there's thousands of homicides, for example, every year. There's thousands of drunk driving accidents every year. And so if you wanted to target Asians, for example, you could take examples of 3 drunk driving crashes, 5, 17 in the country easily, and just talk about it nonstop. Go, oh my God, and then this person was killed by an Asian driver, this person was killed by an Asian driver, until everybody's like, oh my God, what's going on with Asian drivers? Oh my God, this is an epidemic. But in reality, you could look at the numbers and say, wait, is there a disproportionate number of people being killed by Asian drunk drivers or Asian homicides or whatever it is that they're making up? I'm taking a random hypothetical. And the reality would be no, there is no epidemic, and it is not statistically different than anything else. In this case, let's find out. Let's go to the facts. Do undocumented immigrants create and commit more crime or not?
Right, so let's first go to data that we have from the census. So analysis of census data from 1980 to 2010 show that among men ages 18 to 49, immigrants were 1/2 to 1/5 as likely to be incarcerated as those born in the United States. So this talking point that we hear time and time again from the hard right is not true. They're not more likely to be violent criminals.
No, but it's worse than that. No, citizens are more likely to commit crimes, period. In that 18 to 49-year-old group, and that is a huge study from 1980 to 2010. So when you hear, oh, these immigrants are creating more crimes, it's just not true. The opposite is true. Now, that doesn't mean we should kick out all the citizens and leave only the undocumented people. That is preposterous. But understand that it is demagoguery, not backed up by the facts at all. It is the opposite of what is true.
So if you look at the general undocumented population in the United States, about 7% of the nation's population are non-citizens, while figures from the Justice Department show that about 5% of inmates in state and federal prisons are non-citizens, right? If you take into account the general population of non-citizens in the country and then look at the number of inmates, you can tell that there's There's a bit of a gap there. And by the way, what are they in prison for? Well, about 1/3 of non-citizen federal inmates are serving time for immigration offenses, usually re-entering the country after being deported. So it's not like these are all, the people who are behind bars are all violent non-citizens. Oftentimes they just came back to the country after they had already been deported, and so they got, they were put in custody again.
So look, we've got 7% of the country is non-citizens, but only 5% of the prisoners are non-citizens. So they are, again, another fact showing that they are less likely to commit criminal acts. Now, a lot of them are minorities. We've shown you other studies that show that minorities are disproportionately targeted by police. So they're actually more likely to be in prison because of that fact, but still they're in prison less than the average citizen. And then on top of that, 1/3 of them are in prison just for being undocumented. If you took that away, it's even more disproportionate and gets you to about what the other study showed, that they're half as likely as an average American to commit a crime.
And what's interesting is that the Cato Institute, has investigated this. Cato Institute is by no means a progressive organization. They're libertarians, and they've looked at this issue. And one of the researchers with the Cato Institute said, it doesn't matter what I try to do with the numbers. No matter what, we come out with the same result. Non-citizens are not more likely or even as likely as US citizens to commit crimes. Now let's look at drunk driving specifically, because that's what this story, of course, has to do with. Now, as the percentage of inmates without papers rose in the United States population between 1990 and 2014, arrests for drugs and drunken driving dropped, and that's according to a study in the American Journal of Public Health. So we have more undocumented immigrants coming into the country, but if you look at the stats involving drunk driving, you see a significant drop. With every 1% increase in the proportion of undocumented immigrants in a population of 100,000, there were 42 fewer drunk driving arrests, 22 fewer drug arrests, and roughly 1 less drug overdose. Also, the number of undocumented immigrants living in the United States tripled from an estimated 3.5 million in 1990 to an estimated 10.9 million in 2014. At the same time, violent crime rates fell by half.
So if there was an epidemic of crime brought in by undocumented immigrants, crime would not have gone down, it would have gone up. Now, there are actually many factors as to why violent crime went down significantly in that time period. But the idea that immigrants brought in a wave of crime is preposterous, totally counterfactual. So when you see stories like this, it's easy to say, if we didn't have undocumented immigrants, well, then that wouldn't have happened and Edwin Jackson would be alive today. Well, Edwin Jackson would likely be alive today if that particular immigrant was not in the country or had not been drinking, etc. And it is a tragedy. But to use that tragedy for your own political purposes and demagogue over it, and to create a misleading anecdote, which is the opposite of what the reality in this country is, that's where the problem lies.
That is where the problem lies. And I also just want to make a quick point about how Trump absolutely loves to use certain people as props when it fits his political agenda. But as soon as it doesn't fit his political agenda, he'll turn around and call them sons of bitches. So that's something to also keep in mind whenever he has the audacity to tweet about a tragedy like this for political purposes.
Yeah, so if you're a black football player who took a knee during the national anthem, you're a son of a bitch who should be fired. But if you got run over by an undocumented immigrant, all of a sudden, he's like, oh my God, now I get to blame them too. Thank you for being my prop. And that makes this story particularly sick. You just watched the video by the Young Turks, home of the revolution. If you'd like to get a lot more than that, get the full show by becoming a member. TYTnetwork.com/join.